Good morning, everybody. I hope that your Wednesday is off to a good start. Actually, as I'm recording this is Tuesday morning. I'm not going to be able to record tomorrow morning, so I'm doing it Tuesday. And when you're watching it, I assume it'll be Wednesday morning. And I do hope that your day is good, and maybe you've got a cup of coffee with you. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about the Bible, one of my favorite things. I suppose that would be pretty fitting for a pastor preacher. So 2 weeks ago, I talked about translations. What translation should you get if you're going to Amazon or Christian book distributors to buy yourself a Bible, or you're going down to Rockingham to their Christian bookstore? What translation should you get? And I referred to 5 in particular that I like, and of the 5, a favorite of mine. Then last week I was talking about study Bibles, how a study Bible can be useful, and also how a study Bible could actually get in the way. Had some dangers of study Bibles. And as part of that, I did mention 3 study Bibles that I have that I think are useful. And then in the last, as 3 or 4 days ago, I posted something on Facebook which got an awful lot of comments and a few shares. I've seen quite a number of people, copying and pasting and sharing a Facebook challenge, if you will, and it begins something like this. I don't know a whole lot about the book of Revelation, but I believe the Bible and Jesus is coming back, but before that, the rapture, and then the Antichrist, and describes the mark of the beast, and ends with a statement: I want to spend an eternity in heaven, and I believe in God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I'd seen people share that a lot, and as I read it, I noticed several things in there that biblically were, in my opinion, in error. And so I commented about that, made a fairly long post. It got a lot of feedback on Facebook, and so I got to thinking, maybe I ought to take a few weeks and just talk about how we interpret the Bible. And so that's what we'll be doing. If you're going to be teaching a Sunday school class, you're teaching a Sunday school class in a couple of weeks, and you've got your passage, how do you interpret it? Or in the case of something you see on Facebook, and you see a lot of stuff on Facebook, and sometimes it's simply a Bible verse, which is really good. Sometimes it is something which is trying to interpret a Bible verse, and as we all know, not everything on the internet is true. I guess just yesterday or the day before, I saw somebody grossly misapply Psalm 137, and I'll be getting to that either next week or week after. But you've got a Sunday school class to teach. You see something on Facebook. What does this mean? Is this right? So how do we read and interpret the Bible? I'll be giving you some clues, the basic process for how you read and interpret a passage, and these will be things that you can do really without a study Bible at all, without having to even look at the notes in the bottom of the page in your study Bible. So you're given a passage. How do you begin to interpret it? So the first thing is context. In real estate, there is the old saying that there are 3 things that matter: Location, location, location. You're going to buy this house, or you're going to look at a house. How close is that house to the local elementary school? How close is it to the grocery store or other shopping? And I guess the converse could be important. Is the house close to a dump of a motel that is a haven for prostitutes and drug users, drug pushers? Location. The three things that matter in real estate: location, location, location. And in reading the Bible, the three things to consider: context, context, and context. So, with that in mind, I'm going to go through two different passages and look and pull out the context to illustrate how you read and interpret something. And the first of these is one that I think gets misinterpreted a lot, and the second one is something that I have seen used and I think misapplied on Facebook. So, the first passage is Matthew 24. Matthew 24, 40 to 44. And this is a passage that I think people misinterpret a lot, particularly if your view of the end times is pre-tribulational rapture, that Christ returns secretly to rapture the church away, and then after that you've got 7 years of tribulation before a true second coming. If that's how you look at the end of time, you may misread these verses from Matthew 24. Now, the whole debate about how the end times plays out is a different matter entirely. That is a totally different matter. I'm simply talking about these verses and how we interpret them. So, Matthew 24, 40 through 44. Then two men will be in the field. One will be taken and one left. Two women will be grinding the mill. One will be taken and one left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know in what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would have not let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. And so, how do we misread that, and how should we read it? If you tend to look at the end as playing out with a pre-tribulational rapture, it is very tempting to read this and assume that the people who are taken away are raptured away. That can be how you would want to read this, and that becomes sort of the lens through which you read it. And leaving aside altogether whether that is a proper view of the end is, and like I said, that is a totally different discussion, and we don't need to go into that. But how do we read this? First, you read what comes before and after. Context. You read the verses immediately before and immediately after. Read the whole chapter. So the verses immediately before this. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. And then we get to the verses that I read. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women at the mill, one taken and one left. And so it is in immediate context, Jesus refers to Noah's flood. And if you go back and read the whole chapter, then you see that all of chapter 24 of Matthew is dealing with the second coming. It's, to use a fancy word, eschatological. It's apocalyptic. It's got all of the language, all the code language that tells us, yeah, this is apocalyptic, and it's not just apocalyptic. This is eschatological. This is dealing with things of the end. And if you read this and you took a few minutes to look to see if there are parallels in the other Gospels, as a gold star, you would find that Mark 13 and Luke 21 are both rather similar to this. Not exactly the same, but they're similar. So look at it in context. You read the whole chapter, especially what comes right before it. What does it mean? What about the ones who are taken and the ones who are left? So the immediate context is Noah's flood. In Noah's flood, they are going about their daily lives. They're eating and drinking and getting married and marrying their kids off, doing this the everyday stuff of life until the flood comes and some people are swept away and others left. And that's what it'll be, the coming of the Son of Man at Jesus' return. So in the case of the flood, those who were carried away and the ones who are left. The ones who are carried away are the ones who are carried away in judgment. And the flood is a means of sort of starting all over. And the ones who are left are the ones who are saved in and through the ark. So in that context, when Jesus says one to be taken and one to be left, you want to be the one that is left. You don't want to be the man in the field or the woman in the mill who gets carried away. Because the ones who are carried away are equivalent to those who are swept by the flood. Again, that's just an example of how we might tend to misread something. And this is a totally different debate, totally different discussion from how we view the end of time. That's a totally different matter. This is simply this one short passage. And so the other thing I want to refer to, I have seen on Facebook, and it is a meme, if you will. It is a picture of a portion of Deuteronomy 28 with verses 43 and 44 circled. And I'm going to read those verses. (28, 43, and 44). The sojourner who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. He shall lend to you, and you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. This, like I said in the meme, those two verses are circled, and I've seen people share it, and I think this is used to be a statement in regards to U.S. border policy, our immigration policy. So perhaps people will read this and they assume that it might be a prophecy or a warning about how we should conduct our border policy, warning us to tighten up on immigration, to expand the border wall on our southern border of Mexico, and that's a different policy debate. That is, I'm going to stay in my lane. That's a policy debate for governors and congressmen, congresswomen, etc. That's not for me to decide. But what about this passage? Does this passage speak to the need to tighten up the southern border? Does this passage speak to the need to really tighten up on our immigration policy? Well, let's take a look to see. So remember what we do. We look at what we read the passage, and then we consider the the entire chapter, and we think about what sort of book this is. So in the case of Deuteronomy is it is almost entirely law. It is almost entirely a statement of the covenant and all the stipulations of the covenant. And chapter 28 begins like this. And if you faithfully obey the voice of the Lord your God, being careful to do all his commandments that I command you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you. And then you get to verse 15. But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes that I command you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. So, chapter 28 is a statement of blessings that will come if you obey the covenant, if you are faithful to the covenant. And when you get to verse 15, here are the curses that will come along if you aren't faithful to the covenant. But that doesn't tell us enough, does it? It doesn't tell us what all the stipulations are. It just says the blessings and the curses. So, if you're looking at a real paper Bible like this, you just start flipping back. You can look back to see all of the laws, all the regulations through 27 and 26 and then 25. You keep looking, you see anything that refers in one way or another, that might refer in one way or another to aliens, sojourners, not aliens as in E.T. And finally you get to chapter 24. In chapter 24, beginning in verse 14, you shall not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the sojourners who are in your land within your towns. You shall give him his wages on the same day before the sun sets, for he is poor and counts on it, lest he cry out against you to the Lord, and you be guilty of sin. Fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin. You shall not pervert the justice due to the sojourner or to the fatherless, or take a widow's garment in pledge. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I command you to do this. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat the olive trees, you shall not go back over them. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterward. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, Therefore, I command you to do this. So we have those verses in Deuteronomy 24 that are part of the law. They're part of the command. You were sojourners in Egypt. You were slaves in Egypt, and I rescued you out of Egypt and brought you to the land. Because of that, you shall be merciful and just with the sojourners who are in your land. If you read through the Old Testament, you get over and over again, it's repeated time and time again, that God has, I guess, a soft spot in his heart for the people who can't provide for themselves. And in that context, widows, orphans, and sojourners or aliens in your midst. And here we get to these verses from chapter 28. The sojourner who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, etc., etc. So, putting it all together. The command is part of the law, part of the covenant is you shall not mistreat the sojourner who is among you, or the widows and orphans. Be merciful to them. And amongst the curses is this statement that the sojourner shall, if you aren't faithful to this covenant, the sojourner who is among you shall increase and get stronger, and he will lend to you, etc., etc. You'll be the head, you'll be the tail. So, taken in context, if anything, those two verses sort of mean the opposite of what I think is intended when they get shared. Again, this is just a matter of just reading and thinking about something in context. And like I said, this is totally different discussion than what our border policy should be. I mean, if you can be in favor of a stronger border policy or a more lax border policy, that is a different matter entirely. But when we have the words here, what do they mean? How do we interpret them? And in a sense, these words did play out. They did come to pass. If you read on through the pages of the Old Testament, you will find that the prophets railed at the Israelites, both the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, about numerous things. I guess probably first and foremost, apostasy, idolatry, and running a close second, mistreating the poor, mistreating widows, orphans, and the sojourners, the aliens who were among them. And as a result of being unfaithful to the covenant, both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom were sent into exile. And so we have these verses, and in context, they mean sort of the opposite of what I believe people are thinking when they share this on Facebook. So this is just a need to, if you see something, read it, think about it. What's going on with it? And to begin to interpret any passage, the first thing to do is context. You read the chapter. And you may need to read a little, need to expand that reading a little before or a little after. Where is this chapter within the whole book? What sort of a book is it? First thing, most important thing for interpreting any passage of the Bible is simply to get a grasp of the concept. And then next week we will expand this discussion a little bit further. What's the next thing you do after you consider the context? With that, have a great rest of your day.